How's everybody doing? All right. Everybody just get full of barbecue for the third day in a row? You ready to go? So it's great to be here. Welcome, everybody. My name is Mike Dayton. I'm with a company called Shockoe. We just a quick plug, and then I'll be like totally in the background and letting these two guys rock it. But we build unified digital experiences, whether it's a custom mobile app or an immersive activation, all built on mobile. That's what we do. So if anybody needs anything like that, either reach out to me or my partner there, Edwin. Yeah, the good-looking guy with hair by the bar. Yeah. So before we get started, before we just dive in here, Chris and Jeremy, I'll let either one of you take this. But when I first we were talking about this this session, I saw the title Challenger Brand, and then I saw JBL, and I'm like, JBL is to me, it was like a well-established brand. And I'm like, why do you consider yourself a challenger brand? Like, just kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great question. JBL has been around for about 80 years now, like almost 80 years.
79.
Yeah, 79, since 19, whatever, I can't do the math. So it is kind of weird to talk about it as a challenger brand. But I think a quick question, maybe a sort of poll around the room. Who in the last month have used a portable Bluetooth speaker? Okay, who in the last month have used an AirPod? So I think that's probably, a good answer there, right? JBL certainly has a lot of equity and strength in speakers, but as we know, as audio as a category is transforming much more to personal listening rather than social listening. We're using much more of our AirPods on a regular basis. Mobile brands like Apple, like Samsung, and even, Sony and whatnot have certainly dominated the category. So as consumer habits and behaviors around audio have shifted into much more personal, individual listening, JBL is very much a challenger brand in the headphones category, and that's probably why we're really talking about challenger brands here in today's context.
Appreciate that perspective. I think it sets up everything we're going to talk about here. So, challenger brands, you face an uphill battle when you're going after category leaders and trying to differentiate. From your perspective, I'll kick it off to you, Jeremy. How do challenger brands break through?
I think a really simple sort of answer to that is memorability, right? One of my old agencies, I think one of the founders of my old agencies had a really great quote, which is that the most valuable real estate you can have in the world is the corner of someone's mind. And I think that is fundamentally what challenger brands are sort of up against, right? To be able to own that corner of someone's mind, to be able to be known for something. While challenger brands oftentimes have a challenger spirit. They have a lot of things that they want to say. It's a new product innovation. It's something that they want to really sort of talk about and romance. And oftentimes defaulting into the functional, right? Trying to sort of talk about what's functionally good about the product. People forget that people buy brands with their heart first and their minds second. To be able to create that emotional appeal, I think it's really important. Also taking creative risks is really important, to be able to stand out and truly, at least rent in the short term that corner of someone's mind, but eventually own some key associations and attributes so that people can buy you a little bit more fluently. That essentially are some of the core ingredients to what makes a challenger brand, potentially successful and breakthrough for sure.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Yeah. So, Chris, over to you. Like, how does JBL, how do you apply that story to JBL in terms of occupying a corner of somebody's mind in, breaking through the categories?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, just to build on what Jeremy said, one of the ways we think about what a challenger brand's role is, it's like a lesson. Don't try to out Google. Don't try to out Nike. Yeah. Figure out what is that discernible difference that your brand, that unique point of difference, that competitive advantage, what is that thing that your brand can deliver, and go all in on it. From your marketing, your packaging, your communications, operations, customers, or everyone across the ecosystem, go all in on that thing. So for us, we're talking about, we talked about portables, but headphones. So in the headphone space, we're number 4, right? There's a big gap between 1 and 4. And the reality is, in the millennial mindset, there's that whole FOMO. There's that whole, I want to be like everyone else. I want to fit in, right? So there was a brand. They're white. They hang down about this far, and a lot of people use them, right? But if you think about the insight that Apple had. It was everybody, if you even go back before AirPods, everyone had to have the white wire, right? You couldn't be the person with like not a white wire. So that was a very millennial insight. What we did as a brand, we pivoted 180 and went 100% all in the Gen Z cohort. And we said, you know what? These brands, they've got this millennial, they own them. Let's figure out the next generation of consumers. And Gen Z are all about personalization and self-identity. They're the opposite of the I want to look like everybody else. So what we did across our portfolio is we said, we're going to make products, different form factors. Everything we make comes in 8 colors, 9 colors. You can go online. You could customize the case. You can customize pieces within our speakers or our headphones, because this Gen Z mindset is, I want to look like me. So our big pivot was, let's go really deep after the Gen Z market in this idea of self-expression and personal identity.
Yeah, thanks, man. That's cool. So, Jeremy, for everybody here who's not in the personal audio space, I mean, you guys work with, across a bunch of different brands and a bunch of different industries and categories. What are some other parallels maybe in other industries where a challenger brand are breaking through?
Actually, Chris has a really good answer to this one. We were just talking about it right before coming on stage. Maybe, Chris, you want to take that one first?
Okay, yeah, so I'm amazed at this category. If anybody here works in insurance, give yourself a pat on the back, because let me start, hold up, before I give you credit. It's a boring category, right? Insurance is boring. It's a little scary, right? I don't pretend to know the difference between this or this for car or concern, but that's my wife, and so she does all the insurance stuff for us over there. Hi, Michelle. But if you think about that category, they have turned those insurance companies into global brands. And we all watch the Super Bowl, we all watch these big moments, and you probably see an ad and you're like, I forget what I saw a cool ad, I forget what brand it was. Jake from State Farm, right? Don't be your parents, the Gecko. Like, they've personified a little bit scary and very complicated category. So I am amazed at what the insurance, it's like they all got the same brief, and they were like, we have to make our brand be highly discernible. I'm amazed at what all of those insurance companies have done.
Yeah, 100%. And at Havas, we've been working with Progressive for a long time now. I personally haven't been working on that business, but by the virtue of creating all these characters and mascots, it certainly creates that sense of memorability as well, right? Dr. Rick being the latest iteration of the Progressive work. Another category that I also think is really critical to learn from, in the context of challenger brands or in the challenger spirit, is from the sort of card networks. Looking at what MasterCard has been doing for years now on the entire priceless platform, really thinking about how, there are some things money can't buy, and MasterCard is a fuel to anything that money can buy. It's just a really, really smart long-term brand strategy that they have cornered. I think a good reference for us, all to sort of learn from, in categories that perhaps aren't any unique differentiators. I call them perfect competition, if to use economist terms. Perfect competition categories, right, where one product or one service from the other is kind of indiscernible. These are brands in those categories that really make a true concerted effort to find differentiation and distinctiveness in the marketplace, for sure.
Well, thank you. So let's switch over to brand storytelling a little bit here on the topic. A challenger brand has to kind of prove their worth and make that emotional connection. How do you balance the functional proof points while still being able to kind of create that compelling brand story?
I'll start. Jeremy, I think maybe you'll jump in. What's interesting about consumer electronics, and by the way, I brought a product because there's a lot of competitive product in here, so I needed, just to have.
Is that a giveaway? Can I take that home with me?
It's my baby.
I want that really bad.
If you think about most things about consumer electronics, it's a very functional difference between the products. It's fidelity, it's battery life, it's IPX levels of waterproofness. So that's how the brands are different. But from a brand storytelling perspective, it's like, how do you make that an emotional connection? So I'll use an example of something, and it's incredible technology, but I would put you to sleep if I talked about it in depth, which is the new versions of Bluetooth connectivity. There's a technology called Auracast, and with Auracast, it's like basically like Bluetooth on steroids, and it lets you connect a phone to this, to anything. And literally on an airplane now, through the Auracast, everyone on the plane, if they plugged our JBL, one of our speakers, in the dongle into their back of their headset, the entire plane could watch the same show at the same time through the same audio synced up. And I'm sure we've all done this. You want to watch it with like someone, you're like, okay, ready, press play, right? And you have that like moment. We've all done that, right? Yeah. This allows you to actually connect seamlessly at the same time for everyone through that central device. So that's very functional. But the reality is what that is, it's connectivity. It's bringing people together. It's allowing people who either you're separated by an ocean or you're separated by somewhere on a plane, or you're just like, you just want to both put your headphones on and just get in that same zone together. So that very functional, technical topic is actually connectivity for people. And in a lonely world, it's actually powerful. So it's taking a functional message and turning it into an emotional story is what really where we seek to try to sit when we do this.
Yeah, and another JBL example, I don't know if people have seen it. JBL has launched recently the Tour series, which is a wireless charging case for your wireless earbuds that has a screen on it. It's very natural, I think, for marketers to immediately want to go, okay, let's talk about everything that the screen is able to do functionally, right? Tell consumers everything that it's possibly able to do. It is truly a unique differentiator compared to, all the wireless earbuds out there in the market. But what we've really done is to ensure, again, to solidify and rent or own a space in people's minds. We wanted to ensure that the screen is a vehicle for self-expression. JBL is a brand that champions the joyful freedom of self-expression. That's a phrase Chris has heard me say many times when we're working together. And we wanted to ensure that the functional benefit of a particular product is very much linked to what the brand is actually delivering, which is an ability to sort of self-express, to personalize your headphones in a way that, no other competitors can, right? So making your headphones truly yours, something that is ownable to you and don't necessarily follow what everyone else is buying, not follow what everyone else is choosing to wear. So that's how we want to necessarily sort of turn functional benefits into emotional storytelling. But having said that, I know that, there are a lot of briefs that come through our doors that is almost death by RTBs. And there is an important a reason to sort of communicate about your functional superiority as well as challenger brands. So maybe the cop-out answer here is it really depends, right? What I think, a lot of times we sort of move into campaign development without truly investigating what the state of the brand or the product is in the market. Is it that the products are not necessarily, the brand is not necessarily seen as efficacious? Or is it truly that, people, perhaps think that the product is strong enough, but as a brand it's not as exciting or it's not as engaging? So really thinking about, and a good old useful tool to have in this instance is a consumer journey. I think it's a really useful tool to necessarily plan out our communications from top funnel to down funnel, and to ensure that every point we hit the right balance between emotion and function throughout the consumer journey.
So actually, I love the Bluetooth story because I am kind of a tech nerd, but it connected with me. I liked it, bringing people together.
We got one.
Yeah, you got me, man. So let's unpack this just a little bit further. You guys, either one of you, have any like examples of a campaign that you successfully turned a functional statement or a functional proof point into a compelling emotional story?
Well, I think Jeremy and the Havas team should answer that because the campaign that we've just finished over the last year, I'm very proud of the work, so I'd rather let you talk about it.
I think I just talked about it already. I think it's really about looking at the screen that we've talked about in the Tour Pro.
But how you did it with the big ears and different versions of the campaign.
I think we really wanted to ensure that the brand lives through what we're talking about in the functional credentials, right? Like I mentioned, JBL is a brand that is, about championing the freedom of self-expression, because if we are all free to express ourselves, we feel a little bit more joyful, and that's what a brand, essentially is there to do. So we wanted to carry these brand threads into however we talked about the product. But more importantly, we didn't want to talk about it just purely as a product play. We wanted to ensure that we've got a cast of characters that we've built in this global campaign that very much ran in many markets, but very importantly in the US as well, to ensure that we're creating a sense of distinction. So it was honestly quite a scary, risky sell, I think, to the likes of Chris and his colleagues over at Harman when we were developing it, because we had a cast of people who are creators themselves, painters, nail artists, DJs, musicians, and we got them to basically wear big prosthetic ears. And we shot the campaign to kind of show how powerful this vehicle of self-expression is. There was obviously a lot of debate about whether we're making fun of people with big ears. I think that was definitely a point of consideration, but we really had to take that bold risk in order to sort of stand out, right? And the question we asked ourselves, honestly, talking about differentiation, it's not whether anyone, whether competitors will copy, it's that will they copy at all? So we positioned the campaign, and the way we sort of explained it is, will the likes of, and I'm going to drop competitor names here, Beats, Bose, Sony, Apple, do this same approach creatively that JBL is planning to do? And the answer I think we came to as a consensus was no. They will probably not feature big, prosthetic ears in their marketing because it doesn't feel right for their brand. And that becomes a source of truth for us when we're talking about differentiation. It's not necessarily whether they can copy it. Of course, brands can copy it, but will they actually copy it? Is that core to their brand identity? And if it's not, that becomes a source of differentiation for the brand, and it's certainly a winning formula for the campaign.
So let's talk about something really practical, budgets, right? So challenger brands often are not going to have the same ad budgets as category leaders. Talk to the audience here, and I know there's probably most of the folks in this room are somewhat constrained by budgets, right? I don't think anybody's got unlimited ones, but how do you just leverage, what are some smart ways you leverage creativity and risk-taking to overcome maybe a smaller budget than the category leader you're up against?
Yeah, and I'll be honest. First of all, I don't know if anyone has ever worked somewhere where they actually felt like they had too much money, right? That's not a thing. So I've worked at 4 companies literally since college, right? I was at Pepsi, and we always looked at Coke. I was at History Channel. We always looked at Discovery. We're at JBL Harman. We're always looking at Beats and Apple. And brand, I think no one, again, will say, wow, I'm good. I have enough money. But I think the question is more about effectiveness. How are you using your dollars? Being incredibly planful, incredibly disciplined about how you use your money. I would love to target everyone. I would love to be running Super Bowl ads, right? Where you have a lot of wasted coverage, but lots and lots of scaled coverage. We don't have the budget for it, right? So we have to be very planful. We have to go far more digital, a lot more targeted, and do things in a way and that actually helped inform our Gen Z strategy, which I was talking about earlier. We said, you know what? We scrapped every millennial and even every Gen X platform we had. We got rid of every ambassador that didn't appeal or index high against Gen Z. We got rid of every sponsorship, every entitlement we had, but we reinvested those dollars into the Gen Z market. We now have a JBL campus platform for college kids. We have ambassadors who far more embody the spirit of the Gen Z culture and energy and lifestyle. Emerging artists versus the biggest name in music, right? So we've really tried to do things differently. But yeah, no one's ever going to say they have enough money. Everyone's always pissed about some other. And if you think you have the most in the category, you'll compare yourself to another category. So it's about being planful with the dollars you have and as effective as you can.
So, talk about whether it's one of your brands or another Havas client. But talk about a challenger brand that really took a big risk and it worked and it paid off.
I'm actually going to say a non-Havas brand because I really respect the work that they did. I think they're also a panelist at South by Southwest. Liquid Death is a really good example, right?
Wait, we didn't discuss this. That was my example too. That's weird. Wow.
Do you want to take that one, Chris? Yeah, I think it's certainly already innovative in terms of a new product line, right? A canned bottle of a canned water out in the market, and it certainly sort of is already primed for innovation and a disruptive way to sort of go to market. So I think whether we like the campaign or not, if you guys remember, it showed kids basically drinking canned bottles of water looking like they had a party at 3 a.m. and then it followed very nicely by an end frame with a pregnant woman drinking from a can that looks like a beer can, but obviously it's water. It certainly sort of ruffled some feathers in the market. It had a lot of attention drawn into it. And it's certainly a distinctive way to build a brand, right? It's a new entrant into the market. It really solidified attention, which is very lacking. Certainly, when we talk about a sort of plain category like water or bottled beverages. So I think Liquid Death is a really, really good example. Now, having said that, they may have had some issues in terms of actually driving consideration and purchase intent, because relative to the likes of Fiji, Evian, Smart Water, et cetera, they may not necessarily be the sort of brand that is considered down funnel, but certainly as a sort of above the line top funnel approach, they've really managed to sort of secure attention, which is very much needed for challenger brands, right? Challenger brands are constantly in the chase for memorability, for attention, in order to be noticed.
Yeah, I think it's just the best example of emotional storytelling of a functional benefit. That's why, it's literally water in a can. And they told such a unique story about the use case, the consumer, the fun you can have. Like, they just made it into a completely emotional category, which is why I'm very impressed by the work they've done.
So how do you make the determination whether the risk is worth taking? You talked about the Big Ears campaign. You talked about Liquid Death. How do brands make that decision? What do you go through to say, hey, this risk is worth taking?
Oh, that's a tough one. Honestly, you don't know. We never know. If you think about what movies do or what artists do when they put out a new album, we forget that marketing is both an art and a science at the end of the day, and we obsess over the science part of it, but we oftentimes forget that what we're putting out there in the world is a little bit of an art. The same way an artist sweats over months or maybe even years to produce a new album, or a film that is spending 2 to 3 years sort of producing something and then not knowing how it's going to be received out in market. The risk is always there when you're trying to pursue a bold, provocative idea that the market necessarily is not ready for, or perhaps are just not necessarily liking at the particular cultural moment. But I do think, it kind of boils down to a culture of, and I'm talking about team culture here, a culture of learning, and ensuring that, investments to bold, big creative ideas isn't always that, $2 million and up expenditure. Really thinking about testing in small ways in small markets with smaller audiences, and then proving the efficacy of that particular bold idea approach. And then if it's successful, redoing it again. But it does come with, cultures, team cultures, whether that's agency side or client side, that feels, that has room for experimentation, right? I think a lot of cultures corporate cultures specifically, are sort of too afraid to fail a little bit. So there are ways to sort of do small, approaches to see if it works. I do think I'm a big fan of creative testing, maybe as a planner, but I do think as an industry, we've moved away a lot from actually speaking to people, like real people, about whether the ideas work or not. And you don't always have to go to consumers. You can, test some of these ideas in category tastemakers as well, or leaders in the category, or we call them prosumers in Havas, right? It's not necessarily regular consumers who may not necessarily know what's ahead or are on top of trends, on top of the cultural beat, but testing it against prosumers, tastemakers really gives you a sense, and co-creating with them gives you a sense for whether this idea could potentially work in market as well. So all to say is, corporate culture, I think, is important. The culture of learning and experimenting, I think it's really, really critical, and doing it in small, ways that you can validate, but not necessarily just throwing all your big bucks through it.
Yeah, I was going to. Yeah. So we started talking about culture. Let's talk about subcultures and leveraging subcultures in niche communities. Why is tapping into a subculture so important and so effective for growth in it with a challenger brand?
So I would say you could break that into 2 parts. I think subcultures are fascinating opportunities to target hyper-cluster groups of people, on the hopes that also that subculture expands to become a larger culture. And I don't think it's a challenger brand only mentality. I think all brands should be thinking about who are the people that are relevant in culture for their brand that make sense and could potentially bubble up for them. And I'll tell you, like we had a really interesting example, something we worked on together. It's a very large subculture, but we worked very deeply with the snowboarding community for the launch of a headphone. And again, it goes all the way back to, if we had more time, we talk about functional benefit. It was basically a product with a hook. But when you think about a product, and it had very high levels of waterproof, like you basically wear it in the shower. So if you think about a snowboarder, you're doing things that you can't have that fall out, right? So we said, let's go really deep with the snowboard culture. And we took all the functional benefits of our Endurance Peak headphone, which has a hook and it's waterproof and it has a lot of long battery life. You don't want to be on your way up on a lift and lose your battery, right? And we created this really, really awesome just campaign program. We've signed a bunch of snowboarders. And it goes back to the first thing I said, go all in, really, build a relationship, make a commitment, right? We have a whole roster of snowboarders and skiers. And we work with Paralympians and a full roster of folks to help tell that story. So I'd say all brands have the right to think about who are the relevant subcultures and cultures for their brand.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to build on what Chris is saying, in the context of challenger brands, ultimately challenger brands need to change behavior. And behavior change doesn't happen only by the influence of mass culture. If you think about, we at Havas, we always talk about, does the brand enter into the group text? Does the brand enter into the group chat, right? And that's where your behaviors change. If you see your friends doing something or trying a different product or trying a different service, that's when you are most likely to change your behavior to try that too. Just because a massive celebrity is, fronting a particular campaign doesn't mean that immediately I will change. It's the strong ties that change behaviors around us as just humans, right? And not necessarily mass culture. And subcultures are important for that because you're building equity, you're building, engagement, not necessarily exploiting the subculture, but really embedding into the subculture to sort of create that behavior change from the ground up. So that's, in essence, a really important thing. Mass culture accelerates behavior change that's already existing in subculture, but subcultures are the ones that, at the genesis of behavior change. So that's why subcultures, we believe, are very important for a lot of challenger brands to sort of ensure to tap into in order to sort of grow the brand over the long term.
Well, thank you both. And so, as we wrap up here, Chris, maybe talk a little bit about JBL and kind of what you're doing here at South by Southwest, and kind of what you've got planned for beyond your moment in the spotlight here.
Well, we're very happy to be JBL. So funny enough, or actually not funny, but November of 2019, we signed a deal with South by to launch something really big. March of 2020. Everyone remembers that didn't happen, right? So we took a couple years off and we kind of went a couple different directions, and now we're actually back and we built a kind of a couple year partnership with South by. For this year, we are launching a new line of portable speakers. We're number one. That's the one area where we are the industry leader, but we actually haven't innovated all that much over the last several years. So starting Tuesday, so it's Tuesday through Thursday, a brand like JBL really needs to be in the music, it's like the heart of the music track. So we're actually, funny enough, we're taking over right there. It's 310, and we've signed a partnership with Rolling Stone. So all day long at 310, there'll be a JBL bodega, and we're going to have artists, DJs, performances going on all day in this like faux convenience store bodega, and every aspect, every single thing you touch, see, or feel will be how we articulate the product benefits of this new line of speakers. And I brought up Auracast before. We're working with Anderson .Paak. He is going to actually do the first ever Auracast DJ set. So he's going to do his entire set using Auracast technology through like tons and tons of speakers that we're going to have seated around the venue. And then every night we all go to Rolling Stone Future of Music. Again, emerging artists is kind of where we sit to work with all these emerging artists. And each night we're just going to celebrate together, celebrate music together, celebrate our product launch. And we're just, we're thrilled to be back.
That's awesome. So I hope everybody checks it out. I appreciate the speakers, Jeremy Ho and Chris Epple. Let's give them a big hand. Appreciate it. And one final request for the audience. We built the event app here for Brand Innovators. So if you've got feedback in terms of functionality, we're going to continue to improve it, hopefully turn it into more of a networking tool so that brand marketers can connect with each other at these events in the future. But at least there's not as many paper agendas, so we're moving in the right direction. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.